Congratulations on being one of the Fiction Uncovered 2013 titles. The Village is a wonderful novel. It's a fantastic, gripping read. It's also quite an unusual setting for a lot of readers. Tell us a bit about how you chose where to set the village and how you came to write it.
The village is modelled on a real-life place that I visited about 10 years ago first with a TV crew. It's a village in India that's also a prison, a village where everyone has killed someone, but the inhabitants can come and go as they please. No one reoffends. In about 50 years, only 2 or 3 people have reoffended, and no one's really run away in 50 years. So for the past decade, I've been fascinated with this place because I thought a lot about what it means for rehabilitation, what it means in terms of offending, reoffending, and ethically, what does it mean for the victims' families? A ton of questions that I couldn't really answer, and so I ended up writing the novel.
Tell us a bit about the main character, Ray.
Ray is in her late 20s. She's an idealistic, conflicted documentary maker, a wannabe documentary maker on her first big gig. And she's Indian origin, grew up in the UK, and so she feels that she has an in when it comes to India. She can speak the language. There's this idea that language gives her a certain ethical stance. How can you be a bad person if you speak the language and you can get down with the people? And as the book goes on, she finds herself in a sticky moral universe where she needs to make a program, she needs to make something happen so that it's worth watching, but she needs to serve the villagers well at the same time. So I suppose she treads that line between, how do you make a story? You need conflict, you need jeopardy. How do you put it on screen? It involves a measure of artifice. So I suppose Ray is someone who watches but is always being watched. She's always watching the people in the village, but she's always being watched and judged. And by the end of the book, she realises the supreme arrogance of believing that she was the observer rather than the person who was being observed.
Although it's an examination of the kind of poverty that has led people to kill often brutal husbands, or they've been in terrible situations, it's also a book about media ethics, as you say, and those issues are universal whatever country you're making a programme in. Did you consciously set out to have a collision between those two themes? Because that struck me as very effective, the way you handled that.
I suppose the village began for me as an attempt to understand a place that seemed so harmonious, but where I could feel so much was happening under the surface, that there was so much tension and intrigue going on underneath the place that we as naive filmmakers went and just assessed as being a wonderful place, filmed it without any question. I wanted to understand the place, but then as I began writing it, I also wanted to understand what it is to go in and try and document something and what it means to make a story. So in that, I suppose the act of writing became part of the story. The collision between these two things felt like a natural fit, but I suppose writing's quite an organic process, so as you write, you form a kind of plait or braid of all the themes that concern you, and the characters grow and evolve, and then suddenly you have things happening that you'd never planned.
One of the things I really loved about the book is that although you're taking on some hugely serious topics, topics of global importance, it's never earnest or dull. It's a terrific read. And I think this is because the character of Ray, who is morally ambiguous, and she's got a bit of a soft spot for the presenter. There's all these sexual tensions going on within the film crew. She sneaks away from the village to eat meat because she knows she's going to be looked down on for being non-veg. And she's naive in a way, but she is well-intentioned. She does mean for the best.
I suppose I think that liberal naivety can do as much damage as out-and-out wrongdoing or bad intentions. George Orwell said, if thought corrupts language, language can corrupt thought. He believed that thought and language were interlinked. One can be as damaging as the other, as well as having the power to do good. Ray's very concerned with doing good with TV. It's a powerful medium. It reaches lots of people. TV has the power to really affect how people think about other cultures or about other people's dilemmas. She really has good intentions, but they're not enough. And language is all to Ray. It's her way into people, it's her way into getting to know people, it's a way of convincing them of her honesty, of her truth. And truth is a very messy thing in the book. Different people have different approaches to truth. Ray's all about the public and the private. If something is visible, then it happened. If it's invisible, did it really happen? She eats meat in private, but claims to be a vegetarian because that suggests that she's more of a conventional Hindu Indian girl. She has sexual tension with the crew and some kinds of dalliances, but they're not visible. There are all kinds of misdemeanors, drugs, all kinds of things that are happening below the surface that aren't visible. And once they start becoming visible, she has to acknowledge that they really happened.
Her own feelings of ambivalence, and that I think grow and grow as the novel progresses.
Ray has a desire to belong, but she doesn't just want to belong in India. She wants to belong within the UK. She wants to belong within her TV kind of grouping. She wants to belong in her own idea of herself. She has an idea of herself that is possibly different from who she actually is. And when it comes to placing herself in India, she has sort of grand notions of what that is without acknowledging that India is a living, breathing, changing organism, just like any other country full of human beings that are all at odds with each other or grouped in multifarious ways. So Ray has lots of big ideas about how and when to do things, but is often stumped. So that I think I was trying to explore that, that idea when it comes to identity, because identity is a fluid thing. I have a relationship with India that is constantly changing. I go back a lot, but in a way it's always like an unrequited relationship. I always want to be loved back more than I am, possibly more than I love, or it's a very sort of petulant relationship. I'm trying to have a more grown-up relationship over the years. I've done all sorts there. I've worked there, I've seen family there, I've gone there on holiday, I've gone there in numerous ways. But you can't control the relationship each time. You have to hand yourself over to it.
There's a central question that hangs over the plot of the book, which is basically, will the documentary get made or not? And as the tensions between the film crew grow, it's almost as though those three characters represent different ways in which that documentary could get made. Did you yourself know from the start what would happen between those three people?
The question of whether the film gets made or not was one of the big questions without an answer in the book. And it worked quite well to not know which way that would go for a long time. But a point came about a third of the way into writing the second draft when I really needed to know the ending. And I needed to know the ending in quite meticulous detail to write the book. So I needed to know where the train was going, as it were. Otherwise it was in danger of going off the rails. So I worked out the ending, and I had a much longer and kind of more ending with more segments in it, and then that gradually became more and more compact.
You've had terrific success so far. Your first book, Gifted, got fantastic reviews. You've been shortlisted for prizes. You're in the Fiction Uncovered promotion now. You're very much a kind of, new writer to watch. So what's next?
I'm working on a book that's set in contemporary London, and it's about morality again, but in a more immediate, current way. I think I'm going to have a love story in there this time, which I'm quite excited about. And as usual, all of the boundaries of how we decide and create morality in an agnostic universe as human beings are there. So you've got constantly shifting ideas of what's right and what's wrong. I'm still interested in the line between the tragic and the absurd. Comedy and tragedy always go together for me. So there are still lots of mortifying moments in it.